Some last words aren't gentle goodbyes, they're whispered confessions, choked out truths, or final cries soaked in pain. They're not just the end. They're revelations the world was never meant to hear. For many black celebrities, the moment of death became the only time they could speak freely, without fear, without filters. These weren't just farewells. They were warnings, regrets, and raw reflections forged from a lifetime of struggle, silence, and injustice. You might think you've heard it all, but these 21 final messages, found in wills and last breath confessions, will shake you. What they left behind doesn't just haunt, it exposes. So ask yourself, are you truly ready to hear what they couldn't say while alive? Because once you do, there's no going back.
Don Cornelius.
Don Cornelius, the visionary behind Soul Train and a towering force in Black American television, died the way no legend should, alone in silence and in pain. He wasn't just a host, he was the architect of a cultural revolution. With his smooth baritone voice, magnetic presence, and razor-sharp business mind, Cornelius brought black joy, rhythm, and excellence into America's living rooms. Soul Train wasn't just a TV show, it was a lifeline for countless black artists and a declaration that black culture mattered. But while the music played on screen, behind the scenes, Cornelius was quietly unraveling. On February 1, 2012, police discovered his lifeless body in his Los Angeles home, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A bottle of morphine nearby spoke to the chronic pain he had endured following multiple brain surgeries. Beside it, a final note, scribbled in despair, "I can't take this anymore." He had masked his suffering so well, few saw the end coming. After selling the rights to Soul Train in 2008, many say Don withdrew from the world, consumed by a sense of loss. Some whisper he felt he had abandoned the very legacy he built. Others believe he wanted to put his affairs in order for his family. But tragically, he left no will. In the wake of his passing, bitter legal squabbles erupted over his estate, his image, his name. Everyone claimed to honor him, but few stopped to ask what he would have wanted. Don Cornelius once gave Black America a voice on television. But in the end, his own voice faded into a lonely whisper behind a locked door. Soul Train kept on grooving, but its conductor was gone, and no one was left to pull the brake.
James Brown.
James Brown's chilling final words marked the end of an era, and the beginning of a bitter decade-long war over his legacy. He wasn't just the godfather of soul, he was soul. A revolutionary force who reshaped American music, fusing funk, soul, and raw energy into a sound that still echoes through hip-hop and pop today. With nothing but his voice, his feet, and pure fire, James Brown built a musical empire from the ground up. But on Christmas night in 2006, that empire began to crumble. Lying in a hospital bed, Brown looked up and uttered the haunting words, "I'm going away tonight." Not a whisper of weakness, but a declaration, as if he knew death was already in the room. Hours later, his heart stopped. The legend was gone. And chaos moved in. What followed was not mourning, it was war. When his will was read, it didn't bring closure. It sparked a firestorm. Brown had left behind tens of millions in music rights, property, and a scholarship fund for underprivileged children. But instead of honoring his legacy, his family and associates turned on one another. Children sued each other. An ex-wife claimed her cut. Former business partners circled like vultures. Everyone wanted a piece of James Brown. Lawsuits stacked up like records. Lawyers flooded in. The estate was frozen. His music tangled in red tape. Public fights replaced private grief. Year after year, the drama deepened, overshadowing the man, the music, and the message. What was meant to be a legacy of rhythm and uplift became a cautionary tale of greed. Instead of a hero's farewell, James Brown's memory was dragged through the mud, his final act rewritten as one of the darkest, most tragic sagas in the history of American music.
Aretha Franklin.
Aretha Franklin, the Queen's final note lost in a storm of chaos. Aretha Franklin, the undisputed Queen of Soul, wasn't just a voice, she was a force. With a career crowned by timeless hits, countless awards, and a cultural impact few could rival, her legacy seemed untouchable. But in the final act of her extraordinary life, a storm was brewing, one that no one saw coming. On August 16, 2018, after a brave battle with pancreatic cancer, Aretha took her last breath. But even as life slipped away, music never left her. In a quiet moment, on the phone with her dear friend Abdul Duke Fakir, she spoke one final word, Bernadette. Not a farewell, not a message, just the name of her favorite song. A whisper of her soul, hauntingly simple, yet heavy with meaning. But the peace of that moment was shattered soon after. What followed wasn't a dignified tribute, it was a legal free-for-all. Not one, but 3 handwritten wills were discovered. One was found stuffed beneath a couch cushion. Each will told a different story.
None were notarized.
The queen who ruled with elegance and precision in life had left behind a mess of confusion, chaos, and broken trust. Her 4 sons, once united in grief, were thrown into a bitter inheritance war. Accusations flew, lawsuits erupted, and the media devoured every painful detail. Aretha's name, once synonymous with soul and strength, was now dragged through the courts, her legacy torn apart in public view. In the end, what remained wasn't just the music, but a sorrowful reminder that even legends can leave behind unfinished business. Her final word, Bernadette, still echoes like a sacred note untouched by the storm, while the rest of her story was rewritten in courtroom battles and family fractures. A queen's reign ended, not with a grand curtain call, but with questions, conflict, and a silence her voice once filled.
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali, the undefeated legend, and the earthquake that followed. Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest boxer to ever live, he was a force of nature. A world champion with fists of steel and a heart full of fire, Ali stood tall not only in the ring but in the face of injustice, war, and public criticism. His name became a symbol of strength, dignity, and unwavering conviction. So when he passed away on June 3, 2016, at a hospital in Arizona after a long battle with Parkinson's, it felt like the end of an era. His final words were soft, peaceful, "I've lived a good life. I've done what I believed in." It sounded like closure, but it wasn't. Behind those final words lay a storm waiting to erupt. Ali left behind a massive $80 million estate, carefully outlined in a will that divided his fortune among his wife Lonnie and his 9 children. Everything appeared orderly, meticulous, even. But some were left with little to nothing. His brother, Rahman Ali, received a shockingly small portion. That's when the real fight began, this time, within his own family. In the days following his funeral, whispers turned into headlines. Family insiders spoke of manipulation, of Ali being shielded in his final years, of decisions made when his voice was fading. Some accused Lonnie of isolating him. Others hinted at long-standing resentments finally boiling over. What began as global mourning slowly shifted into worldwide curiosity. What really happened behind the scenes? Ali's legacy, once built on punches and poetry, entered a new arena, one of legal battles, unspoken grief, and family fractures. His final breath may have marked the end of a champion's life, but it also triggered an emotional earthquake that still ripples through those he left behind. Even legends can't outrun the weight of legacy. And when money and power enter the ring, no one leaves untouched.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson, a death that tore a family apart. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was more than just a global icon. He was a living myth, a once-in-a-generation performer who moonwalked his way into history with a voice and presence the world had never seen before. But behind the dazzling lights, platinum records, and breathless crowds, Michael's life was a haunting paradox, brilliance shadowed by tragedy. On June 25, 2009, the world stopped. News broke that Michael Jackson had died suddenly in his Los Angeles home.
Fans wept.
Headlines screamed. The man who had conquered music, fashion, and fame was gone. Killed by propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic never meant to leave the operating room. Found unconscious in his bed, under dim bedroom lights, Michael's final whispered words to his personal doctor, Conrad Murray, were chilling, "More milk." A cryptic nickname for the drug that would end his life. What followed was a storm of scandal. Why was a superstar being put to sleep like a surgery patient, night after night?
Who let this happen?
And most importantly, who would benefit? Just days later, another bombshell dropped, Michael's will. Over $500 million was left to his 3 children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, and his beloved mother, Catherine. But one name was missing. His father, Joe Jackson, the man who had molded and pushed Michael from childhood, was completely shut out.
Not a dollar. Not a mention.
Furious, Joe launched a legal war, claiming the will was fake, dragging the family into a ruthless battle that tore them apart. The Jacksons, once a picture of unity on stage, became a courtroom drama for the world to dissect. Every signature was questioned. Every drug bottle examined. Every interview replayed. But answers never came, only obsession. Michael lived in spotlighted glory but died in haunting silence, leaving behind not just a fortune or a family feud, but a cultural earthquake that still hasn't stopped shaking.
John Lewis.
John Lewis, a hero's legacy and a controversial final chapter. On July 17, 2020, America lost one of its most revered civil rights champions, Congressman John Lewis. A lifelong warrior for justice and equality, Lewis left behind more than just history, he left behind a movement. From leading the iconic Selma March of 1965 to serving over 3 decades in Congress, his life was a masterclass in courage and conviction. But when he passed away at age 80 after battling pancreatic cancer, his legacy became entangled in controversy. His will divided his estate between his only son, John Miles, and several civil rights organizations he'd helped shape. Though seemingly fair, the decision sparked quiet tensions. Some felt the groups that had been the backbone of his life's work deserved more. But it wasn't just about money, it was about meaning. His final message, "Keep the faith and keep your eyes on the prize," echoed across a nation still reeling from the killing of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was both a blessing and a challenge to the next generation. Yet, as the world mourned, questions surfaced. Were his ideals truly safe in the hands of those left behind? Could his mission outlive him? Though his estate was carefully planned, perceived imbalances in his final wishes stirred tension between family, activists, and the very cause he gave his life to. In the end, John Lewis's death was not just the loss of a hero, it was a test of whether the movement he helped ignite could carry on without him.
Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston, a will lost in limbo, a legacy drenched in heartache. Whitney Houston wasn't just one of the greatest voices in music history. She was a symbol of both soaring talent and quiet suffering. Her life was a whirlwind of platinum records, sold-out arenas, shattered relationships, and personal demons. When she died tragically on February 11, 2012, inside a Beverly Hilton hotel room, her body was found lifeless in a bathtub, water gently covering her chest. It was a haunting end that mirrored the pain she carried for years. Her whispered final words? "I just want to love and be loved." A simple plea that echoed a lifetime of yearning and heartbreak. But death didn't close Whitney's story. It opened a new, brutal chapter. Her will, once thought to be straightforward, turned into the center of a bitter, years-long battle. She left her fortune, millions in royalties, properties, and personal assets, to her only child, Bobby Christina Brown. But the inheritance was set up in stages, payable at 21, 25, and 30, to protect Bobby's future. Instead, it became a ticking time bomb. Just 3 years later, in a chilling parallel, Bobby Christina was found unconscious in a bathtub, just like her mother. She never recovered. Her 2015 death threw the Houston and Brown families into a savage legal war. Both sides claimed ownership of Whitney's estate. Behind closed courtroom doors, accusations flew. A handwritten, unsigned note found in Whitney's suitcase hinted she wanted to revise her will, expressing fear over Bobby's unstable surroundings. But the court dismissed it. The legal maze remains tangled. But one thing is heartbreakingly clear. Whitney Houston spent her life chasing a love she never truly found. From a distant father, a troubled marriage with Bobby Brown, to fears over her daughter's safety, love eluded her at every turn. And in the end, her final words became a haunting legacy: "I just want to love and be loved." The real tragedy? She never got the chance.
Marvin Gaye.
Marvin Gaye, a blood-stained will and a father's bullet. Marvin Gaye, the soulful genius behind timeless classics like What's Going On and Let's Get It On, gave the world music that stirred the soul. But behind the melodies was a man tormented by pain, secrets, and a tragic end that stunned the world. On April 1, 1984, just one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin's life came to a heartbreaking halt inside his Los Angeles home. In a violent argument that had been years in the making, his own father pulled the trigger, shooting Marvin in the chest. He collapsed in his bedroom, blood pooling beneath him, his final words chilling in their simplicity: "Father, don't do this." It wasn't a scream. It wasn't rage. It was a broken plea from a son crushed by years of emotional torment. Marvin didn't just die from a bullet. He died from years of internal war. Mental anguish, addiction, career decline, and overwhelming debt had driven him back into his parents' home, where old wounds festered. The volatile relationship between father and son exploded in tragedy. But the pain didn't end with his death. Marvin's will, intended to safeguard his legacy for his children, sparked a bitter and prolonged battle among family members. Relatives turned against one another, some accusing others of altering documents, some blaming Marvin's children, others exploiting gaps in the law. His once priceless catalog became the center of a ruthless legal war that drained hearts, wallets, and trust. Meanwhile, Marvin's mother was left shattered, forced to coexist with the man who had taken her son's life. His father, convicted of voluntary manslaughter, received a suspended sentence and faded into obscurity. No real justice.
No closure.
Today, Marvin's music still moves the world, but his final words linger like a ghost: "Father, don't do this." More than just a dying whisper, they echo the deep loneliness, fractured love, and unresolved pain that defined the life of one of music's most beloved legends.
Chadwick Boseman.
Chadwick Boseman, the silent farewell of a king. Chadwick Boseman wasn't just the man behind the Black Panther mask. He was a symbol of hope, resilience, and quiet strength. To the world, he stood tall as a Marvel superhero. To the black community, he was a real-life warrior. But behind the camera, a heartbreaking secret was unfolding. On August 28, 2020, the world mourned his shocking death. What many didn't know was that Boseman had been privately fighting stage 4 colon cancer for 4 long years, filming, smiling, inspiring, all while carrying an invisible pain. He never made his illness a spectacle. No public farewells, no headlines filled with fear, just silent bravery. Even in his final days, Chadwick chose grace. His parting words, "Live true to yourself," were not just for his wife, Taylor Simone Ledward, but for all of us, a quiet call to live with purpose and authenticity. He didn't seek sympathy. He sought meaning. After his death, another layer of his story emerged. His estate, valued at just $3.5 million, modest by Hollywood standards, was left entirely to his wife. The decision shocked some and angered others. Family members claimed he'd promised them support, sparking bitter disputes. But Chadwick's legacy wasn't about money, it was about intention. His handwritten letters, not dollar signs, were his real inheritance to those he loved. In them, he thanked his parents not for giving him riches, but for giving him freedom. The freedom to choose his path, to live with honor, and to die with dignity. In the end, the Black Panther didn't roar. He whispered. And somehow, that made his departure all the more powerful. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke, a cry in the dark, a legacy silenced. Sam Cooke wasn't just the king of soul, he was a revolutionary. A voice that gave soul music its heartbeat and black artists their power. At the height of his fame, he wasn't only singing, he was fighting, for ownership, for freedom, for justice. But on a chilling December night in 1964, that voice was silenced by a single gunshot in a cheap motel room.
Not with dignity, not with peace, but with chaos.
His final words, "Lady, you shot me," weren't just a cry of pain. They were a whisper of betrayal, a signal that something far darker was at play. The official story was quick, self-defense.
Case closed.
But for many, the truth never added up. Why would a man at the peak of his career, a friend of Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, end up dead under such murky circumstances? Sam was one of the first black artists to own his master recordings, a dangerous move in an industry built on exploitation. Was he silenced for standing too tall? And the tragedy didn't end with the bullet. His death ignited bitter legal battles over money, rights, and ownership. Though his will left everything to his wife and children, just months later, his widow Barbara shocked everyone by marrying his friend Bobby Womack. The family was torn apart. Sam's own daughter exploded in rage when she saw Womack wearing her father's clothes. Meanwhile, Cooke's anthems, like "A Change Is Gonna Come," were sold, reissued, and milked for profit, while the people he loved were left behind. His legacy wasn't just lost, it was looted. Sam Cooke sang about hope, about freedom, about change. But in the end, his own story became a haunting reminder: even the brightest voices can be dimmed when they threaten the system.
Nipsey Hussle. One gunshot. One final breath.
And a legacy too powerful to die. Nipsey Hussle was never just a rapper, he was a movement in human form. A visionary, an activist, an entrepreneur who turned pain into purpose. Through his music, he didn't just entertain, he educated, uplifted, and awakened a generation of dreamers who came from nothing. He gave them something to believe in, themselves. On March 31, 2019, outside his beloved Marathon clothing store, Nipsey was gunned down in broad daylight. The bullets didn't just take a man, they silenced the heartbeat of a community. As he lay bleeding, he didn't cry out for help. Instead, he gave the world his final command: "Keep my work going." That wasn't a plea.
It was a mission.
Nipsey refused to chase the spotlight of fame without bringing his people with him. While others flexed riches, he invested in Crenshaw, opening businesses, hiring locals, building a blueprint for self-made success. He showed young black men how to own instead of rent, how to build instead of beg. His killer was someone from his own circle, but many believe the truth runs deeper. Nipsey had been working on a documentary about Dr. Sebi, a controversial healer surrounded by mystery and speculation. Some say Nipsey was getting too close to dangerous truths, and paid the price. Theories swirled. Was this really just a personal dispute, or something darker? After his death, his will revealed not just financial planning, but a legacy set in stone. He'd created trusts to protect his music, his businesses, his real estate, ensuring his children and family would never have to struggle. He prepared for the day he might not return. Because somewhere deep down, Nipsey knew his time was limited. He didn't ask to be remembered. He demanded that his mission continue. His son may grow up without ever hearing his father's voice in real time, but he'll inherit something even more powerful: a roadmap, a revolution, a reason to keep pushing. Nipsey Hussle lived like a flame, bright, defiant, and uncontainable. And though that flame was struck down, it was never extinguished. His message still echoes: keep my work going.
And we will. Lisa Lopez.
Lisa Lopez, a warning before the end. Lisa Left Eye Lopez wasn't just a member of TLC, she was its beating heart, a fearless force of creativity and conviction. Bold, unapologetic, and bursting with talent, Lisa carved her place in music history as a trailblazer who never backed down from the truth. But on April 25, 2002, her voice was silenced in a tragic car crash in Honduras. Days before her death, Lisa was filming a documentary and chillingly warned, "Don't let this happen to anyone else." The footage, now haunting, felt like a premonition. Just days later, her SUV flipped off the road. She died at the scene. No one could save her. Her death was not only sudden, but surrounded by a strange chaos that mirrored her turbulent genius. In the aftermath, her legacy became entangled in disputes over music rights and estate control, as family and former bandmates struggled to agree on how to preserve her image. And then there was Supernova, her solo album, released only in Japan.
A haunting, unfinished farewell.
A final whisper from an artist who still had so much left to say.
Otis Redding.
Otis Redding, a sigh before the silence. Just hours before boarding the flight that would end his life, Otis Redding sat quietly backstage, his usual spark dimmed. He didn't laugh with his bandmates.
He didn't smile.
He simply sighed, "I'm just so tired." No one knew those would be his final words. On December 10, 1967, at only 26 years old, the legendary soul singer's plane plunged into the icy waters of Lake Monona, Wisconsin. The fog was thick. The silence after impact, deafening. Otis and most of his bandmates perished. When his body was recovered, he was still clutching a torn jacket, his final hold on a world he was just beginning to change. The tragedy struck just 3 days after he recorded what would become his most iconic song, "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay." Hauntingly reflective, it sounded like a man writing his own goodbye. But the heartbreak didn't end with his death. What followed was a bitter legal war. Though Otis had left everything to his wife, Zelma, and their children, record labels and distributors rushed in like vultures, trying to seize control of his music. Zelma spent years in court, fighting to keep Otis's legacy in the hands of his family. Otis Redding left this world tired, but his voice roared louder than ever after his passing. His legacy, raw, soulful, and tragically cut short, became both a blessing and a battle cry.
Aaliyah.
Aaliyah, fear on a flight with no return. Aaliyah was more than a rising star, she was a cultural force. With timeless hits like Try Again and One in a Million, she captured the hearts of millions and redefined R&B for a new generation. But on August 25, 2001, her bright future was cut tragically short. After wrapping a music video shoot in the Bahamas, Aaliyah stood apart from the laughter and chatter, gazing quietly at the sky. The flight had been rescheduled to leave early, and something didn't feel right. She turned to a crew member and whispered chillingly, "I'm scared." No one knew those would be her last words. Just 10 minutes after takeoff, the Cessna crashed. Everyone on board, including Aaliyah, was gone. She was only 22. But her death was only the beginning of another tragedy, a bitter war over her legacy. Her will may have been clear, but no one was prepared for how massive her fame would become. Record labels and former collaborators fought for control over her image, her name, her very essence. Her mother, Diane Houghton, faced brutal claims from producers who coldly insisted, "We made her, so we should maintain her image." Aaliyah's artistry became a battleground. Every song, every photo, every memory turned into a commodity. Even after her family regained control, the scars of that battle remained. "I'm Scared" wasn't just a premonition of death, it was a cry against what she feared becoming, not a woman remembered with love, but a symbol sold and manipulated by others. Aaliyah's story is a haunting reminder that in the world of fame, even in death, peace can be hard to find.
Billie Holiday.
Billie Holiday, a haunting farewell after a lifetime rushed. Billie Holiday, the soulful siren of jazz, mesmerized the world with a voice soaked in sorrow and strength. She wasn't just a performer, she was a survivor, singing her pain into poetry and turning personal agony into national anthems of heartache. But her brilliant light was dimmed far too soon. On July 17, 1959, Billie died not in comfort, but handcuffed to a hospital bed, watched over by cold-eyed police officers, not doctors or loved ones. Her final words, "Don't be in such a hurry," whispered more than weariness. They were a desperate warning, a last breath of wisdom from someone who had seen life chew people up and spit them out. After years of addiction, heartbreak, and persecution, Billie wasn't just a fallen star. She was a casualty of a cruel system and crueler love. In death, she was stripped of dignity once more. Her estate handed to her estranged husband, Louis McKay, who exploited her name for personal gain. Her legacy, like her life, was bruised and betrayed. Yet Billie's voice still echoes, raw and timeless, a cry from the depths, reminding us that even in silence pain can sing. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final words weren't just a request, they were a quiet prophecy. On April 4, 1968, the beloved civil rights leader stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, his gaze distant, as if he sensed that time was slipping away. Moments before fate claimed him, he turned to musician Ben Branch and softly said, "Ben, make sure you play Take My Hand, Precious Lord tonight. Play it real pretty." It wasn't just about the music. It was a farewell wrapped in faith, a hymn for peace, whispered on the edge of tragedy. Seconds later, a bullet ended his life, but not his legacy. Those final words now echo through history, not as a goodbye, but as a timeless reminder of his sacrifice, his faith, and the fight he never abandoned, even in death. Malcolm X. Malcolm X, a peaceful greeting, a violent end. Malcolm X was more than a civil rights leader. He was a fearless voice for black liberation, a man who refused to back down in the face of injustice. But on February 21, 1965, in New York's Audubon Ballroom, that voice was silenced in a storm of gunfire. As he stood before a crowd, preparing to deliver a powerful speech that could have marked a turning point in his journey, he opened with a simple phrase, "Assalamu alaikum," a greeting of peace. Moments later, chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the air, and the man who preached strength, dignity, and self-determination collapsed before those who believed in him. His peaceful words became a cruel irony. Malcolm chose unity in his final breath, but the world answered with violence. His assassination wasn't just a tragedy, it was a seismic wound to the movement he helped shape. And yet, even in death, his message endured. His final greeting remains a haunting reminder: peace can be whispered even in the shadow of hatred, and truth cannot be killed.
Bob Marley.
Bob Marley, a final whisper that echoes forever. Bob Marley wasn't just a reggae legend, he was a global voice for freedom, love, and resistance. His music moved millions, but it was his spirit that lit a fire in the hearts of the oppressed. On May 11, 1981, as cancer drained the last strength from his body in a Miami hospital bed, Marley's fight still burned within him. He was only 36. In his final moments, as his son Ziggy stood by his side, Bob whispered a haunting truth that would outlive him: money can't buy life.
No fame. No fortune.
No miracle could change what was written. Those 5 words were more than a farewell, they were a final lesson. A raw reminder that life is precious and fleeting, and no amount of success can outrun mortality. Marley's journey wasn't just about music. It was about justice. His songs were anthems for the unheard, cries for peace in a world torn by violence. Even in death, his voice still sings, and it refuses to be silenced. Jimi Hendrix. The tragedy of Jimi Hendrix, a genius consumed by fame. Jimi Hendrix wasn't just a guitarist, he was a revolution in sound. A visionary who bent the rules of music until they broke, he changed how the world listened, felt, and experienced rock. But behind the electric fire of his performances was a man quietly unraveling. On September 18, 1970, in a lonely London hotel room, the dream ended. At just 27, Hendrix died from a drug overdose. His final words, "I need help bad man," echoing like a cry from a soul drowning in fame, addiction, and isolation. It wasn't just the loss of a musical genius. It was the slow collapse of a man caught between brilliance and the brutal machinery of celebrity. His death left not only heartbreak but a legacy clouded by chaos. With no will, Hendrix's estate became a battlefield, family and former managers waging war over his name, his art, and his fortune. His music still lives, timeless and powerful. But the real tragedy? A legend who soared too high, only to be swallowed by the very spotlight that made him shine.
Tupac Shakur. Tupac Shakur, a final curse from an icon.
Tupac Shakur wasn't just a music legend, he was a cultural firestorm who reshaped the very soul of hip-hop. But his death at 25 wasn't just the end of a rising star, it was the heartbreaking fall of a restless soul who never truly found peace. On the night of September 7, 1996, the Las Vegas Strip echoed with gunfire. Flamingo Boulevard became the backdrop to one of music's most haunting scenes. Tupac sat slumped in a BMW, his body bleeding out, yet his spirit unshaken. When police leaned in, asking if he needed help, his reply was chillingly cold, F***KU.
No fear. No surrender.
Just raw defiance, an unbreakable soul staring death in the face. Tupac lived knowing death could come at any moment. He walked a tightrope between fame and fatality, pulled deeper into a world of feuds, gunfire, and paranoia.
That night, he took 4 bullets.
6 days later he slipped away, alone, leaving behind a swirl of rumors, conspiracy theories, and unanswered questions. But his death wasn't silence.
It was ignition.
That final F***KU wasn't just rebellion, it was a declaration. A symbol of defiance that still roars in the hearts of millions. Tupac may be gone, but the fire he lit? That will never die.
Fred Hampton.
Fred Hampton, a life they tried to silence, but never could. Fred Hampton wasn't just a leader, he was a force. At just 21 years old, he rose through the ranks of the Black Panther Party and united people across race and class with a vision so bold, it terrified the establishment. He built the Rainbow Coalition, a multiracial alliance that threatened to upend the status quo. But before he could fully realize that dream, his light was stolen in the dead of night. On December 4, 1969, at 4:45 a.m., while Fred slept beside his nearly 9-month pregnant fiancée, betrayal crept in. The door was shattered. Bullets tore through the darkness. The FBI and Chicago police, under the COINTELPRO program, launched a brutal raid, an execution masked as law enforcement. Fred never stood a chance. Shot in his bed, drugged beforehand. His final breath wasn't fear, it was defiance, we'll continue to fight. The man who helped orchestrate it? William O'Neill, his bodyguard, an informant, bought and controlled by the FBI. Fred Hampton didn't die in battle. He was assassinated for his ideas, for daring to believe that unity and justice were possible. But his death didn't silence the movement. It amplified it. His memory became a rallying cry, his voice echoing through generations of activists who still shout, "Power to the people." Fred's legacy isn't buried in a grave, it lives in every protest, every coalition, every fight for justice that refuses to be silenced. These aren't just stories. They're scars. Final words from legends who gave everything for change. So what do you think? Which story hit you the hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because this is only the beginning of exposing the truths they never wanted us to know.